So hello, welcome back to the next part of compensation, which is the theories of wages or the theories of compensation. All the topics that we are going to discuss in today's class are mentioned here for your reference. Now let's get into the class. Before directly entering into today's topic, let me give you this. See, if you read from different sources, for example, in some textbooks, you will be having 10 wage theories. In some online websites, you will be having only 7 wage theories. So basically what we have done is today in today's class, in today's topic, we will be discussing the 8 most commonly seen wage theories. Okay, that is the first thing that I want to tell you. And the second thing is, see, this topic, this particular today's topic is a very small and simple topic, but it is very important topic when it comes to both subjective as well as objective matters. That means, see, for example, if you are in your MBA or BBA and all these things, there is a chance that you will be getting this question telling that, write about the wage theories, write about the compensation theories and all these things. And when you move to the objective kind of examinations, in particularly, UGC net or, the written examinations of PSUs, you may be expecting questions like, see, in one column you will be having all the theory names, and in one column you will be having all the names of the people who have proposed these theories, and they'll just simply ask you to match the following. Okay, now what I am trying to tell you is, see, for every theory that we are going to discuss in today's class, you will be having the name of the people or the name of the person or the names of the people who have proposed that particular theory. Try to remember as many names as possible in this very small concepts. You will not be having too many names, but you will be having 8 different theories and 7 or 8 different names. Okay, now try to remember as many as possible, because as I already told you, there is a huge scope of bits coming from this area. So having talked about all this, let's get into today's topic, which is the wage theories. So today's topic, the theories of compensation. There are various theories of compensation, also known as the theories of wages or theories of employee remuneration. These are the different names for this particular concept, theories of compensation. Okay, now the main theories of wages are discussed below. The most commonly seen, I told you there are so many different other theories, but today we are going to discuss the 8 most commonly viewed theories of wages. See, the first theory is something called as subsistence theory, and it is given by the person, remember this, it is given by the person called as David Ricardo. Okay, now David Ricardo developed this theory. Okay, see, before directly entering into the entire theoretical part of this particular theory called as subsistence theory, you need to understand what do you mean by subsistence first. See, subsistence in simple terms means bare minimum. That means, for example, if a doctor tells that every human being should sleep at least 4 hours a day, and if I am sleeping only for 4 hours a day, that means my sleeping level is at subsistence level. That means my sleeping is at subsistence level. That means I am sleeping bare minimum, the minimum requirement, that the minimum required hours I am sleeping 4 hours a day. Or in other terms, if a doctor tells that, see, every human being should eat at least 4 teaspoons of rice every day, and if I am eating 4 teaspoons of rice every day only, then it is, or basically we can tell that my eating level is at subsistence level, or I am eating at subsistence level. That means, see, subsistence means bare minimum. Similarly, subsistence wages means the wages which are required for the bare survival of the labor or worker or whatever it is. Okay, so you need to understand the meaning or the concept of subsistence before directly entering into the subsistence theory. Now, see, it is also known as the iron law of wages. Another name for this particular theory called as subsistence theory is also called as iron law of wages. Okay, now it says that workers are paid to subsist and perpetuate the race without increasing or diminishing. Now, what do you mean by this? See, basically this particular theory, David Ricardo proposed this particular theory of subsistence, this particular subsistence theory. Okay, now what did this particular person told, or what did this particular entire theory propose? See, this particular theory is telling that organizations pay the workers or the labor at a subsistence level. Now this theory also tells that, see, if the organizations pay below the subsistence level, that will definitely impact the labor, right? See, subsistence level wages means, wages for the bare survival of the labor or bare survival of the worker. That means, paying just so that he could afford his food and shelter. That's it. Now if you pay, less than that, he will definitely suffer. Okay, that is the first thing. And second thing, if you pay less than the subsistence level, nobody will work for you. Okay, similarly, this is one case, right? Now if you pay above the subsistence level, that means if you pay more wages down, all the labor will increase, right? That means in simple terms, see, all the labor will be like, okay, the wages are high, let's go and work. In this way, the supply of labor will increase, right? If you increase the subsistence, or if you give the wages beyond subsistence wages, all the labor will come, right? That means the the supply of the labor will increase, right? Now That is one thing. And this theory also tells that if you pay more than the subsistence wages, all the labor will start to marry and they'll start to reproduce. That means they will start to, they'll start to plan for kids and all these things. In that way indirectly also, the labor are increasing. So this particular theory tells this way, telling that okay, there is this concept of subsistence wage, and subsistence wage means the wages required for the bare minimum survival of the labor. And this particular theory tells that, see, organizations maintain the subsistence wage, and it is required to maintain a subsistence wage because if you go less than the subsistence wage, the labor will suffer. If you go above the subsistence wage, that means if you give more than the subsistence wage, then the labor supply will increase, they will marry, they will reproduce and all these things. So what happens if more labor come? If you give the wages above the subsistence wage, that means if you are paying more to the labor, what happens? More number of people will come to work because the salaries are high. And if more number of people start coming to work, that means if the supply increases, that will ultimately lead to the reduction in the wages, right? That means if the supply increases, the wages will reduce, right? Okay, so in this way, this theory proposes that the wages should be subsistence, or organizations pay subsistence wage, and this particular subsist or the wages given to the labor should not go above or below the subsistence wage. So it should be as a constant point. That is the reason why this particular theory is also called as iron law of wages, because it is a constant. Okay, the wages should be constant according to this particular theory. Okay, so this is the simple meaning of this theory, subsistence theory. Okay, now see, low wage leads to the decrease of labor due to death and malnutrition, while higher wage rates increase their number due to better health, long life, and more marriages. Okay, so this is basically the simple thing proposed by this theory. See, each and every theory will be very small. Okay, now this theory has been criticized on the following grounds. That means there are so many criticisms about this particular theory. What are the different criticisms? See, the first criticism is the relation between marriages and wages. See, I already told you, right? If the organizations pay more than the subsistence wage, that means if the organizations pay more in addition to the increase in labor, we also told that this particular theory told that if you give more wages than the subsistence wage, the labor will start to marry, right? So this is also one kind of thing given by this theory, telling that more wages means more marriages. Now, the first criticism that this particular theory received is, what is the link between wages and marriage? See, it is incorrect to say that when the money income of a person increases about a subsistence level, he marries and increases the birth rate. While when the income increases, people improve their standard of living instead of having a marriage. This is also another possibility. So this particular theory only concentrated on, if you give more salary, more marriages, everyone will start marrying and reproducing. This particular criticism number one tells that, see, how can you tell that? There may be people who are planning to grow financially, or who are planning to invest on some other things. How can you bring the entire point onto a single thing called as marriage? In this way, the first criticism, or this particular theory, received its first criticism. Now the second criticism is demand side ignored. See, while we were discussing about different things proposed by this particular theory, we have talked about only two different things. That means we have talked about different things, but we concentrated on two things. Subsistence wage, if you give less than subsistence wage, then labor will not come to work, because the wages are too less. That means the supply of the labor will be less. If you give more than the subsistence wage, more number of people will come to work because the wages are high. That means the supply of the labor will be high. In this way, we have only talked about the supply of labor in according to the propositions of this theory, but we have never talked about the demand part, right? That is another criticism. That is the second criticism received by this particular theory called as subsistence theory of wages. See, this theory gives more importance to the supply side and ignores the labor demand to determine wages. Now, the third criticism is the difference in wages. See, while discussing all the different things about the subsistence theory, or what are the different things given by this particular theory, subsistence theory of wages, we have only talked that, see, there is this particular subsistence theory, above that labor will increase, the labor supply will increase, below that labor will they will start to suffer and all these things. We have talked as if salaries throughout the world are same, and there is only one wage called as subsistence wage. See, we have ignored that there will be different occupations for which the wages will be different. In this theory, or this particular theory did not mention that subsistence wage is different for different jobs. this particular theory told as if there is only one wage throughout the world for each and every labor, irrespective of their work and skills and each and everything. And we have to maintain that particular level of subsistence wage and all these things. This particular theory told as if there is only one wage for each and every worker in each and every organization. But is that the reality? No. Wages will be different for different occupations, different kind of labor. Labor means there will be so many different kinds of workers, or there's so many different kinds of work involved. So this particular theory did not focus on that. Now, this theory fails to explain why wages differ from occupation to occupation and from person to person. Okay. Now that is the third criticism this particular theory received. The fourth criticism is trade unions were ignored. See, again, I will be taking you back and forth to the all the concepts that are basically the all the propositions, or all the things that this particular theory has given. See, this particular subsistence theory told that there is this constant subsistence theory. Above that, if you give above that, more number of people will come to work. If you give below that, nobody will come to work, and all the people will suffer and all these things, right? Now, we have talked as if nobody will be there in order to try to manipulate or try to control these things. See, in organizations, in reality, there are trade unions which will come into action, or which will start to negotiate if the wages go below the subsistence level. Now, we have not talked about each and everything or anything about the trade unions in whatever the theory has proposed. That is another criticism that this particular theory received, telling that, see, you told that organizations will give only subsistence level. Now, if organizations give less than subsistence level, it will be a suffering for the workers or labor. If the organization gives more than the subsistence level, more number of people will come and start to work. Now, you did not talk anything about the trade unions, because the trade unions will also have an impact on the subsistence level, or the level of wages, the wage rates in the organization. We have not talked about anything about the trade unions, because this theory among all the propositions of this particular theory, among all the things given by this particular theory, trade unions were not mentioned. That is another criticism that this particular theory received. So this theory ignores the roles of trade unions, but in the present age, unions are playing a significant role in determination of the wages. So these are the basic criticisms that this particular theory, called as subsistence theory of wages, received. So you have understood the concept of the subsistence theory of wages, or the subsistence wage theory, or the subsistence theory in simple terms. What are the different things proposed by this particular theory, and what are the different criticisms received by this theory, right? So this is the first theory, and it is given by a person called as David Ricardo. You have to try to remember the name, because I told you, when it comes to objective part, or objective examinations, the names are important. Okay, given by David Ricardo. Now, moving on to the second theory. The second theory is something called as wage fund theory. Okay, now this particular theory, called as wage fund theory, is given by a person called as Adam Smith. So what did this particular theory tell? Let me again give you a simple explanation of this entire theory, wage fund theory. What is the name? Wage fund theory. So this entire theory talks about a fund which has wages, okay, which is used to store wages. Okay, keep that thing in mind. So this is given by Mr. Adam Smith. Okay, now what does this particular theory tell? Wage fund theory. This particular theory tells that there is this fund. Okay, what is this fund? Who created fund? We'll talk about that later, but just listen. See, there is this fund which is used to store all the money that the organizations use in order to give wages to the their labor. That means to give you in simple terms, for example, if there are 20 rupees in the wage fund, okay, if simply wage fund is like a purse in the organization, like a wallet in the organization. Keep it in, try to remember in that way. So now what this theory proposed is, see, you have 20 rupees in the wage fund, right? Now there are 10 workers, right? This particular theory tells that the amount in the wage fund is divided among the labor. That means you have 20 rupees in the fund, you have 10 workers. So this 20 rupees in the wage fund is divided equally among all the labor. That means 20 rupees in the fund, 10 people. Each person will receive 2 rupees. Now, in the similar scenario, or in a different scenario, if there are only 5 rupees in the wage fund, only 5 rupees have been accumulated in the wage fund, and still there are 10 labor, or 10 workers. Now if according to this theory, all the funds in this particular wage fund are to be distributed among the labor, the number of workers equally, right? Now you have only 5 rupees, you have 10 people, that means each and every person will receive only half a rupee. So this is what this particular theory tells. This particular theory proposes that there is this wage fund in the organization which has all the accumulations of the wages, and the wage rates are determined by the amount in that particular wage fund. That means if the amounts, or if the money in the wage fund is more, then each and every worker will receive more. If the money in the wage fund is less, each and every worker will receive less amount. In this way, this particular theory proposes, telling that okay, this all the money in this particular wage fund is divided among the labor equally. Remember that this particular wage fund theory proposes that. See, the wage level is a function of surplus funds available to the employer. That means the higher the fund, the higher the wage. The focus is on the employer and his capacity to pay. Okay. See, this is just a theory part. So just you have to just remember that what are the different things given by this particular theory. Wage fund theory. This particular theory tells that there is this fund which is called as wage fund, which has all the funds that are to be paid as wages in that particular fund. And if more amount of money is there in that fund, each and every person will receive more share, because this particular theory proposes that all the money in that particular fund is to be distributed among the labor, right? Similarly, vice versa, if there are less amount of funds, or if there is less money in that particular fund, each and every person will get less amount, because there is less amount, and it has to be divided equally among all the different workers or different labor. Then each of the person will get a less share. So this is what this particular theory proposes. Now, what are the different criticisms that this particular theory received? See, this theory has been criticized on the following grounds. See, the difference in the wages. I told you, right? If there are more funds in the in the wage fund, this particular thing called as wage fund, if there are more funds, each and every labor will get more, because the funds are divided or distributed equally, right? Now, how can you tell that each and every worker or each and every labor will be having the same amount of work? Now, how can you tell that all the funds, all the money in the wage fund should be distributed equally? There may be some labor who do more work when compared to other labor. That means they should be paid more when compared to other labor, right? Now, in this particular in this particular theory, you are telling that wages should be distributed equally. That means you are not at all considering people, the chances that some people work more, some people work less, some people's tasks are difficult when compared to other people's tasks. In this way, you're not at all concentrating on those things. All you are telling is all the amount in the wage fund should be distributed equally. How is that possible? Because there will be different jobs which will be having different salary ranges, right? Or different wages, not salaries, wages, right? So that is the first criticism that this particular theory has received. See, according to this theory, all the workers receive equal wages, while the wages differ from worker to worker, right? Now, the second criticism is the demand factor was ignored. Here also we have indirectly talked about the supply, how many workers are there, where did we talk about the supply? We did not pinpoint telling that there is a supply of labor. Where we talked about the supply, I told you, right? If the amount of if the money in the fund is more, people will be getting more. If the money in the fund is less, people will be getting less, right? There we have only concentrated on how many people are there, instead of how many people we need. We have not at all concentrated on the demand of labor in this theory also. That is another criticism that this particular theory received. See, in this theory, labor supply has been given much importance while the demand factor has been ignored. Okay, now the existence of fund. The third criticism that this particular theory has received is, what is a fund? What is the wage fund are you that you're talking about? See, this particular theory failed to give clarity about what do you mean by wage fund, who created the wage fund, how is that particular wage fund created, on what proportion are you keeping money in that wage fund, how much are you keeping in that wage fund, what are the rules for how much money should you keep in that particular wage fund. In this way, this particular theory did not give any information about the wage fund. The only thing that this particular theory told is that there is this fund, and all the wages are stored in that fund, and all the wages in that particular fund are distributed equally among all the labor. That is the only thing that this particular theory told. But this particular theory did not tell that what is that fund actually, what do you mean by the fund. who created it, how did they created it. In this way, nothing about the wage fund, only fund is there, that's it. What is that fund, who created, how is it created, what are the different purposes, what are the different contributions to it, how did you know that this much money only should be kept in that particular fund. In this way, nothing, no information has been given about this particular wage fund. That is another criticism that this particular theory received, which is, see, according to this theory, there is a separate fund for the payment of wages, while in reality there is no special fund that is particularly meant to pay wages to the workers. Okay, so when you come see when you come into today's organizations, you will not be having any fund in which organizations deposit the money, and based on the amount of money accumulated in that particular fund, we will give wages. In this way, in reality these kind of things do not operate. So this is the major, one of the other major criticism that this particular wage fund theory has faced. So this is the second theory of wages, which is called as wage fund theory and given by Mr. Adam Smith. Okay, now moving on to the third theory. The third theory is something called as surplus value theory, and it is proposed by a person called as Karl Marx. Okay, now Karl Marx developed it. Here the labor is viewed as a commodity for trade. What this theory propose, let me give you in simple words. See, this particular theory tells that the labor is treated as a commodity. Now what do I mean by that, or what basically does this particular theory mean by that? See, organizations require someone to do the work, the labor. Organizations require labor. Now what this theory proposes is that, see, organizations basically buy the labor or treat the labor as a commodity and buy them with something called as wages. That means this particular theory is telling that, see, organizations require labor to do, in order to do their work, okay, in order to complete their work. Now same as buying an item in the market, this particular all the organizations go out and purchase labor, and the price of purchasing that particular labor is wages. This particular theory tells that. So that is the meaning of this particular line. Here the labor is viewed as commodity for trade. Okay, now labor adds value to the product. Okay, now the employer did not pay the full amount so collected from the customer, and instead only a part is paid to them as wage, retaining the remaining by the employer. Now what do I mean, by this? See, here we are basically telling that, see, first of all, the first and foremost thing that this particular theory tells that, labor is a commodity. That means the organizations are purchasing the labor under the price called as wage. That means in order to buy the labor, okay, they are giving wage. Okay, so labor are treated as commodity. That is the first thing. The second thing is, see, the organization has bought the labor, right? Now labor start working. Okay, so there is this product in the organization's product, whatever it is. For example, if it's the automobile industry, the final car, or if it's the the fashion industry, the final dress material, whatever it is, the product of the organization is there, right? Now organizations use this labor in order to manufacture that, right? And once manufacturing is done, the organization will sell it, right? Now once the organization sells their product, money will come, right? All the value will come into the organization, right? Now this particular theory is saying that out of all the value that comes into the organization by selling their products, or sending their products into the market, only a part is paid to the labor as wages, and all the remaining thing, all the remaining value, or all the remaining money, or all the remaining accumulations that comes into the organization after giving off the wages, the organization claims it, or organization takes it. Okay, see, this is the basic thing that is given by this theory called as surplus value theory. That means all the surplus value after settling of the wages is taken by the organizations. Now this theory also tells that the organizations may sometime require the labor to work more, or the organizations may sometimes require the labor to give out more productivity. Now even though the labor gives more productivity, or in simple terms, even though the labor works hard and tries to produce, or tries to contribute more, and if they put in more effort, and their more effort resulted in producing more number of products, and if the organization sends or sells those products, and even in that case also the organization will give them the same wages, and all the extra money that comes into the organization, all the extra value that comes into organization by sending out more number of products, because the labor has put in more effort in order to produce more number of products, all that extra thing also, all that surplus things also, organizations will take. Only they will pay the labor their wages. Okay, that is the basic thing given by this particular theory. See, Marx speculated, however, that the owner of the capital could force the worker to spend more time on the job than that was necessary for earning his subsistence income, and the excess product or supply value thus created would be claimed by the owner. Okay, this is what I was telling, that the organizations may sometimes require or force the labor to work more than they usually have to in order to produce, or in order to produce more number of things, or in order to attain, or in order to take out more productivity, so that the organizations can produce more number of products, and they can sell out or send out more number of products in the market, and gain more number of more amounts or more money. But still, even that case also, even though the labor has put in more effort in producing more products, which in turn generated more amount to the company will pay only the wages, the standard wages, and all the extra thing that comes into the money, all the surplus thing is kept by the organization, the owners and all these things. This is basically this theory called as surplus value theory, given by Mr. Karl Marx. Okay, now talking about the next theory, the next theory is something called as residual claimant theory. This theory is given by someone called as Francis Walker. Okay, so Francis Walker propounded this theory, or proposed, or gave this theory. Now, to give you this entire theory in simple words, see, residual claimant theory is, this particular theory proposes that in the production, or in organization, there are four main entities. Okay, the first one is land, the second one is capital, the third one is labor, and the fourth one is entrepreneur, or the owner, or the top management in the organization. Now this particular theory tells that by producing or manufacturing, whatever it is, selling the company's products, whatever it is, all the money that comes into the organization is there, right? All the money. Now this particular theory proposes that all the amounts, all the money that comes into the organization is there, right? Out of all that money, first, all the three things apart from the labor is there, right? The land, the capital, the entrepreneur, all these three things are there, right? All the money is distributed among these three things, and so the leftover part is there, right? The last leftover part, the wages are given from that particular leftover part. That means, what I'm trying to tell you, that, see, for example, if the organization manufactured, like for example, 1,000 or 2,000 different products. Now the organization, what it does is, after manufacturing, it starts sending their products into the market, by selling or distributing, whatever it is, they started to sell their products, and after selling the products, money came into the organization. That means all the money comes, right, after selling the products. Now this particular theory tells that among all the, or from all the money that comes into the organization, first of all, these three things take their share. That means the first part is given to this particular thing, the second part is given to this particular thing, the third part is given to this particular thing, and the leftover, the sum amount, the leftover part is there, right? After all these three things given their contribution, their share, the leftover part is there, right? Now the wages are given from that leftover part. So this is what this particular theory tells, that the worker or the labor here is the residual claimant, or someone who claims the residual means the leftover part. Okay, that is basically what is given by this particular theory called as residual claimant theory, given by Mr. Francis Walker. See, according to this theory, four factors add value to the product which is manufactured. These four factors are land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship, or entrepreneurs are the top management and all these things. Now the revenue earned by selling the products was first distributed among the three factors apart from the labor as compensation against their contribution. Now whatever remained was paid to the labor as wage against their value addition. Okay, now thus labor is considered as a residual claimant. So this is basically the things proposed by this particular residual claimant theory. See, this theory has been criticized on the following grounds. This theory also has criticisms. What are they? See, supply influence ignored. This theory ignores the influence of supply side in the determination of wages. So, see, what we have discussed, about the different things proposed by this theory. This theory proposed that, in organizations, or in basically in organizations, there are four main components that contribute towards the products. What are they? Labor, land, capital, entrepreneurship, or the owners or the top management, the organization. Okay, now we told that out of all the money that comes into the organization by selling the products, or either by distributing the products, whatever it is, the money that comes into the organization, first of all, is distributed among these three things. Apart from the labor, the remaining three are there, right? It is distributed among these three things based on their contribution. Whatever is left over is then distributed in the form of wages, right? Now we have not talked about this particular, these kind of situations where, see, for example, what if more number of workers are there and only few, or basically only less amount has been accumulated. That means after distributing the entire money that came into the organization among these three things, what happens if only little amount of money is left and more number of people are there, more labor is there? What happens in that particular scenario? Or what happens if more amount of money is remained in the in the residual, and very few very few workers are there? What happens in that particular scenario? In this way, we have not talked about the supply of labor in the organization. That is the first criticism that this particular theory received. That is, supply influence ignored. This theory ignores the influence of supply side in the determination of wages. Now, the role of trade unions, again, okay, this theory talked about, whatever the thing, whatever the money is accumulated, or whatever the money is left over at last, it will be distributed among the labor. There also we did not talk about the trade unions. Even though trade unions have a power of influencing the wages, we have not talked about trade unions. That is another criticism that this particular theory received. See, it fails to explain how trade unions raise their wages. Okay, now, entrepreneur's right. A residual claimant is the right of the entrepreneur and not the labor. The labor receives its share during the process of production. See, what this point means is that, see what I told you, after selling all the products, all the money comes into the organization, and among all the money, first these three things take their share, and the final residual, the final leftover is given in the form of wages. I told you, right? This I did not tell you, this particular theory proposed, right? Now see, for example, a product took 1 year to produce. Okay, now after 1 year, the organization started to sell its products which have been manufactured, finished, into the market. Now, as I already told you, it took 1 year to do the production, right? Now throughout this 1 year, the labor received their wages, right? Yes, right. Now how can you tell that after selling all the products, all the money comes in, at last the leftover part will be distributed as in the form of wage? How can you tell that? While production only, the wages are the wages are being received by the labor, right? So this is another criticism that this particular theory received. Now see, the last criticism is the case of loss. As this particular theory already proposed, the leftover is distributed in the form of wages, right? Now what if the company faced huge loss and there is no leftover at all? What will you do in that particular case? What will the organization do? The organization cannot tell, right? We have faced loss, you only give us money in return, or we will not be giving wages at all. In this way, the organization cannot do, right? That is another criticism, which is, see, suppose the firm suffers a loss. In that case, how labor will bear the loss? Okay, that is another criticism that this particular theory, residual claimant theory, has received. So this is the fourth theory, or fourth wage theory, which is residual claimant theory, given by Mr. Francis Walker. Okay, now the next wage theory that we are going to discuss is something called as marginal productivity theory. Now what do you mean by marginal productivity theory? First of all, see, so this theory is given by Phillips Henry and J.B. Clark. Okay, now there are so many different things that are given basically by this particular marginal productivity theory. Like, see, this particular marginal productivity theory, the first thing that this particular theory proposes is that, see, I will keep on hiring new labor or new workers in my organization as an employer. I'm talking as an employer, okay? The employer here will keep on continuously, hiring, or, you will keep on hiring new labor or workmen until a point where the cost bared by the, or the cost incurred by the employer will be more than the value contributed by the, the hired workers or the hired labor. That means, for example, previously, the 50 rupees is the cost incurred by me as an employer in order to hire one particular worker. Now he is contributing like 100 rupees value to my organization. That means, I am incurring only 50 rupees, but he's giving me 100 rupees value or 100 rupees worth of value to my organization. That means he's contributing 100 rupees to my organization, but I incurred only 50 rupees in bringing him into my organization. When I reach a point where the cost incurred by me is more when compared to the value that this particular labor or worker is contributing to my organization, I will stop hiring. That means, see, for example, if the latest worker that I have hired has contributed 100 rupees worth to my organization, and hiring him costed me 50 rupees, it is good. He's basically I have put in less money, I'm getting more value. Okay, now in this case it is okay. Now I will keep on hiring. Okay, now I will keep on hiring until a point where if I bear, if I bear 50 rupees in hiring a new worker or new labor, and his contribution is less than 50 rupees, that means, I'm paying more and I'm getting less, right? At that particular point, there will be a certain point where you will reach, you will reach a limit where the cost paid by you is more when compared to the value that you're getting from the labor. At that particular point of time, you will stop hiring. So that is the first particular point this particular theory gives. The second point or the second proposition that this particular theory gives is that, see, the labor is paid based on their contribution to the organization. Okay, that is the second thing. Now, the third thing is this particular theory assumes that the market is perfectly elastic. And the fourth assumption that this particular theory has is that, each and every labor is same in terms of contribution and all these things. Okay, so basically, if you club all these things, we can tell that this particular theory, propose that the wage rates or the wages are determined by the value proposed by or value given by the last hired worker in the organization. That means, if previously 10 workers are there and the value generated by them is 100 rupees. Now extra one new worker came in, or I have hired a new labor. Now after the new person joined, that makes the overall number of workers I have is 10 plus 1 11, right? Now previously 10 people contributed 100 rupees. Now if after this one extra person joined, that means the overall 11 people contributed a value of 120 rupees. That means by the addition of one new worker or one new labor, the value contributed to the organization is increased by 20 rupees, right? Now my wage rates are determined by that 20 rupees. In this way this particular theory proposes. Okay, now see, the marginal productivity theory holds that the employers will tend to hire workers of a particular type until the contribution that the last marginal worker makes to the total value of the product is equal to the extra cost incurred by hiring one more worker. Okay, as long as each additional worker contributes more to the total value than he costs in wages, that's what I discussed, it pays the employer to continue hiring. Beyond the margin, additional workers would cost more than their contribution and would subtract from the attainable profit. This is what I was telling you. Okay, now this theory also has certain criticisms. Now what are the different criticisms that this particular theory received? See, this theory has been criticized for the following grounds. Okay, now it rests on unrealistic assumptions. For the theory to operate properly, as I already told you, right, this particular theory, apart from giving those 2 points, this particular theory also proposes that, the market is perfectly elastic, all the labor are same in terms of contribution and all these things. In this way, there are so many different things that we have not actually discussed yet that this particular theory gives. Okay, now all those things come into the contribution. That means, what are the different things that we have not mentioned in the basic theory part of this marginal productivity theory, you will be learning in the criticisms part. See, it rests on unrealistic assumptions. For the theory to operate properly, according to this theory, labor and capital must be fully employed so that the increased productivity can be secured only at increased cost. Capital and labor must be easily suitable for each other, and the situation must be completely competitive. Obviously, none of these assumptions fit the real world. So if you did not understand this last paragraph, the criticisms part, here we are telling that, see, this particular theory proposed that, the market should be, perfectly elastic, it should be highly competitive, and, labor should be easily available and easily substitutable. Each and every labor should be same and all these things in terms of contribution, or each and every labor are actually same in terms of contribution. In this way, there are so many different things given by this particular theory, and the criticisms tell that, see, all those things are not, not applicable in reality. Okay, so these are the criticisms. This particular theory fails to live in the reality, or make things actually make sense in the reality and all these things. So these are the criticisms received by this marginal productivity theory. Okay, now moving on to the next theory, which is something called as demand and supply theory. Now, just as the price of a commodity is determined by the interaction of forces of demand and supply, the rates of wages can also be determined in the same way with the help of demand and supply forces. So this particular demand and supply theory of wages tells that, see, the wages are determined by the demand and supply of the labor. That is what simply this wage theory gives. Now, the next theory that we are going to discuss is bargaining theory. So this particular bargaining theory has been proposed by a person called as John Davidson. Now, John Davidson developed this theory. Here, the wage level is determined by the bargaining power of the employers and their associations versus the employees and the trade unions. So, in this particular bargaining theory, we are telling that, see, wages in the organization are determined by the bargaining between the employers and their organizations, and employees and the trade unions, workers and the trade unions, labor and the trade unions, and all these things. Okay, this is what this particular bargaining theory gives in simple sense. Now, the last theory of wages that we are going to discuss today is something called as behavioral theory. Now, see, norms, traditions, customs, goodwill, and social pressure influence the wage structure. This is what this particular theory gives in simple sentence. Now, wages are the best motivators for workers. So here we can tell that this particular theory tells that, see, wages depend upon the behavioral factors also. That means there are cases, or there will be cases where you can actually use wages as motivational factors. So based on the behavioral aspects, based on the behaviors, wages change, or wages are dependent, or wages vary. Now, the wage must satisfy many needs as identified by Maslow, Hertzberg, and others. These are Maslow's, when we go to the subject of organizational behavior, we will be reading about, certain things called as, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, Hertzberg two-factor theory and all these things. These are basically theories related to motivation. How, human beings get motivated, what are the different things that they prioritize, and all these things we will be reading there. But basically, this particular behavioral theory tells that, see, wages are the things which the organizations can use as motivators. So the wages vary dependent on the behavioral factors also. Now, examples of needs are physiological needs, security, food and shelter needs, etc. Okay, so this particular behavioral theory proposes that wages vary according to the behavioral needs and all these things. So these are the different theories of wages that we have discussed today. As I already told you, there may be so many different wages in different sources, but wherever you go, or whichever source you take in, these will be the common things that you will be seeing. Okay, so we'll stop here for today's class. We have discussed the theories, right? In the next part, which is the last part of compensation management, we will be discussing about, some other, or, the leftover, the balance, important topics like what are the different forms of compensation, what are the components of compensation, and miscellaneous topics like, what do you mean by golden handshakes, golden parachutes, broadbanding, and all these things we will discuss in the next class. So we'll stop here. We'll continue in the next class. Thank you.